Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, you will experience something that we don't get to see very often in the world of chess. And that is Magnus Carlsen losing a chess game. But it's not quite what you think. Many people have defeated Magnus Carlsen in the past. But when has Magnus Carlsen defeated Magnus Carlsen in the past? And that might confuse you, but that's good because your interest is captivated. You would like to get to the conclusion of this video, which I will bring you along this journey. You will laugh, you will learn something, and it will be a pleasant viewing experience. And for those of you that are watching this video over the last few days here in July, June 2023, you will know I have been traveling. If you're watching this in 2024, none of this means anything to you, but right now I have left the house for the first time in like 27 years of living, and I'm traveling a little bit. And today, I actually encountered some very cool people on my trip. I was at an airport, and I just want to give a shout out to Josh, who I met. I met a couple of other people who never gave me their names, took some photos. Very, very cool to be traveling the world and chess fans coming up to you, because I'm used to it in America. 30 to 35% of my viewing audience is from the US. Let me know where you're from. It still blows my mind every single day that people watch chess from all over the world, and it's really crazy to be getting recognized in tiny airports around Europe. This was not designed to be an intro where I tell you about being famous. That's not really the point. It's mostly to tell you that I still am not really used to or prepared for this, and I just want to thank you all for playing chess. Allow me to show you how Magnus Carlsen defeats Magnus Carlsen. Now, you may have already noticed that that says Levon Aronian. Yes, Magnus is currently playing in a tournament called the Global Chess League. It's an Indian organized tournament being held in Dubai. It's an esports style team event. And today, Magnus very cleanly and wholeheartedly defeated himself in a game of chess. Without further ado, here we go. Pawn to b3. Magnus plays the Nimzo Larsen opening. He's looking to fight for the center with his dark squared bishop. He'd like to play e3, knight f3 as well, sometimes f4, and sometimes you go back to more traditional setups. Levon plays pawn to d5. The move b3 is a high pressure move for black because black basically has a cornucopia, a plethora of options, if you will, on the first move. Have you ever been to a restaurant or a deli or a store and there's like 47 options and they all look good? That's the way it feels like playing against the Nimzo Larsen. Levon plays d5, and then he develops his knight to f6. Magnus plays knight f3. He could play the move e3. He could play the move knight f3. There is, I think, literally no difference between the two moves. I think the move knight f3 in some cases can dissuade putting your bishop out. So, for example, knight f3, bishop f5, e3, e6, you can play like knight h4. You can try to like go for the bishop, but I don't know. I don't think there is any difference between these two moves. And Levon plays the move bishop g4. Bishop g4 is an extremely provocative move. It's a provocative move for two reasons. Number one, the bishop is just a target for the pawn. Like, it's much more common, in my opinion, to play a reverse London, because the London is good with both colors. Don't clip this and put it on Anarchy Chess, but if you have an opportunity to go for this type of setup with white or with black, you'll probably be fine. I also made a video called Magnus Carlsen Crushing GMs with the London System, which shows you how to play the London like a very strong player. Go find that video, go comment on the video. I'm here from the Gotham video, Magnus beats Magnus. I always enjoy seeing those comments. The second reason why this move is very provocative is not just this, it's also knight e5. It's also knight e5. It's also that the knight can jump into the middle and immediately hit the bishop. But black is basically arguing that this is a waste of time, because then you will just immediately get that knight targeted and the knight can't actually do any damage on its own. So e3, Magnus volunteers himself for a pinning. e6, Magnus is not going to be playing knight e5. He can play c4, d4, bishop e2. Those are his next few moves. He chooses h3, which is one of the reasons why I told you the move bishop g4 is extremely provocative, because if white wants to get aggressive and create a position that has a lot of imbalance, he's going to do that. You can't really do that with the bishop on f5. Bishop h5. This is not a trade that the black wants right now, because white will go here. You don't want to give up a bishop for a knight unless you are getting something tangible that you can explain in return. And in this case, you are getting absolutely nothing tangible in return, like literally nothing. You can argue that the queen has left, so the knight can go here, here, here. Maybe that will work against somebody 2,829 points lower than Magnus. It's not going to work against Magnus. So bishop h5. doesn't take on f3. Now Magnus can once again play bishop e2, d3, d4, c4, Freudian slip. He plays d3, which is definitely a weird move, right? It's definitely a weird move. He thought for 30 seconds about it. He gained 10 seconds back. Plays the move d3, blocks his own bishop, but he wants to put the bishop on e2. Maybe he wants to put the bishop on g2. So he's okay not going this way. He's also okay not blocking in this bishop. This bishop. This bishop. There we go. I drew the diagonal correctly. Black plays h6. The idea of h6 is, to be honest with you, I have no idea what. Just kidding. If black had just developed with something like c5, the idea of this was actually to block this bishop's activity and then to go here and then take the bishop. That was the idea. You see, if Magnus had just gone for that with something like g4 and this, black would go here potentially. And the computer is claiming that this is wrong because apparently you can weaken your king. But from what I understand, Magnus played d3 to probably stop that. And then g4, knight to e5, and life is good, right? Now we have the exact same plan. But Aronian has played the move h6 in this position, and he's done it in order to play bishop to h7. Okay, plays bishop to h7 and gets the bishop out of the way. Otherwise, he is just going to take a really big damage to his structure, and that is not something that he would like. So he goes here. Magnus plays knight d2. Levon plays this. So we've already discussed this. This move was played because you are trying to trade off the knight that white has put into the center of the board, and you don't want white to exert any more pressure on the position. And white takes, black takes, bishop g2, c6. Rock solid light squared structure, right? So the bishop is staring at nothing. The bishop is also staring at nothing. It's a very, very kind of boring position, but we're going to see if Magnus can do typical Magnus things and win the game. But the video is called Magnus Carlsen defeats Magnus Carlsen, right? This Magnus defeats Magnus. I don't know what I named the video. I think I named it something along those lines. I'm still deciding as I'm recording this. And Magnus plays queen e2. He can castle this way. He can castle this way. He can play f4. He can play e4. He can play c4. He can play all of these different moves. And black does the same. Queen c7. So far, so good. I mean, really nothing special. The bishop is staring at this pawn, which is making it a little bit difficult to develop the bishop here, but that's life. And now Magnus plays f4, just trying to take a bit of space. The move f4, of course, weakens some squares behind the pawn. Every time a pawn moves, some squares are weak behind it that used to be strong, but it's taking a little bit of equity in the center. Black can, of course, still castle queenside, but he chooses to play the move f6. The move f6 has one very, very clear idea, and that idea is to disallow the bishop from seeing g7. That's it. I mean, black basically just wants to play a bishop move. Now, he could have played something like rook g8. This is also fine, but I guess Levon just didn't want to... to be honest, that's it, actually. I think he just didn't want to. I think the move f6 also has an auxiliary idea, which is to play the move e5. Like, you cannot play the move e5 if you play rook g8. If you play the move e5, I will play f5, probably. I can also maybe take and just blow the center open. So he plays f6. I mean, the position is still, like, very boring. It's not boring. I mean, actually, it's the opposite. It's, like, very tense. But there's nothing really happening. I mean, it's a game between two grandmasters where we still have a game and a half ahead of us, right? And both of them still have 14 minutes, 12 minutes on the clock. Magnus plays castles queenside. Levon can also play castles queenside, and the position will remain very tense, but first he chooses to play queen a5 and attack the pawn on a2, which Magnus has a very easy response to, which is king to b1. There is one very interesting line here where the computer just says you can sacrifice this pawn completely. You could just lose this pawn. I don't know why you would do that. I guess you get a counterattack, and if black does this, you have like take. This is not made because of this, king b1, and I guess this is actually way too powerful. So you can actually play queen a5, e4. You can also play king b1, right? Well, he's Magnus. plays e4. Yeah, now black actually cannot take the pawn, so black castles long. And white now plays king b1. Black can continue going over here to justify his plan. Levon, a move ago, right? A move ago, he played, not a move ago, a few moves ago, he played the move f6, which blocks the dark squared bishop's view and allows him to play for e5. So seeing as though Magnus committed his king, he puts his queen on a5, then he puts his bishop on a3, and Magnus plays bishop takes a3. Magnus decides to play bishop takes a3 because he could preserve his bishop, but I think he doesn't like this. He just really feels uncomfortable with the prospect of the dark squared bishop having such a strong post on that square. Not to mention the potential drilling from this side of the board. If Magnus ever like takes on d5, he's just going to get in a big world of trouble, because this is going to open up, this is going to open up, knight c5, like you can lose very quickly. I mean, knight takes d3 and it's just mate. Now, I'm not saying Magnus is going to lose like this, but you don't want to get crisscross applesauce like this with the bishop on a3. Just not smart. So king b1, bishop a3, and he takes. The good news for Magnus is that while the queen is very strong and while the dark squares are weak, there is absolutely no way for black to get there. The black knight cannot ever get to c3. It can never get to c3, because to get to c3 it would have to go through b5 or d5. And the only forward move that you have, for example, is knight b6. And yes, if I am really trying to lose, I will allow you to get the knight to c3. But that's not going to happen. So Magnus is completely confident here, and he can turn his attention to marching forward. It's a little bit unnerving that both kings are castled on the same side. It makes it a little bit harder for white to play for something. But Magnus thinks for a little bit, and he takes on d5. He decides to do this because it opens up the e-file. I can't draw arrows while on vacation. That's okay. Mildly drunk from flying. And if c takes d5, of course, very easy. You take the pawn, then you probably win this pawn too. So we have this. So we have the exact same 7 pawns. We have the exact same material of knight and light squared bishop, and both pawns that have been traded are e-pawns. Literally any move you make in this position maintains equality. White can play rook e1, knight f3. White can play the other rook to e1. I'm sure white can play queen f2. Okay, and at the very worst, it gets to minus 0.1, which is basically equal. Black might want to play a5, a4, maybe knight b6, knight c5, but there's no way that you can't do anything. Even if you succeed in playing a5, and then I play like here and you play a4, literally nothing happens. The only way that I can lose this position is if I allow you to go here, then I allow you to go here, and then I allow you to go here. And even then, I will go there, stop mate, and I will continue the game with queen c1. Okay, like, yes, I'm obviously completely lost, but it's not possible to lose this position. So Magnus plays rook e1. Levon thinks for a bit and plays the move f5. He spends 2.5 minutes on this move, and it's not a great move because it's really relying on breaking through this side of the board. f5 is trying to open up the bishop, and it's trying to open up the f-file, and it's trying to play knight f6. That was the purpose of the move f5. If white plays g5, then black can play take-take and maybe even f4 in some positions to reopen the position. So Magnus plays knight f3. He doesn't spend a huge amount of time. It's back in Levon's court. He takes on g4. His time is ticking. I mean, he is spending a lot of time trying to open up the position and transform things. And now he plays this, but this plays directly into what white wants, because white wants to play f5. White wants to get rid of this bishop. So Levon now is losing a little bit of the grasp of the position. In a slightly surprising fashion, Magnus spent some 3 minutes here. It was probably because he was calculating queen d2, but also probably he was calculating queen e7, because queen e7 is not just an aggressive move. It's an offer of a queen trade which would disallow the queen any attack. So after this, white has a very pleasant position where he pressures the bishop, but I think Magnus just decided he doesn't have enough of an advantage here. Like, the position is pleasant, but black will play knight f6. Everything is defended. You can play rook h1, but then I just play rook g8. Take. If you play rook h6, I take on g4. It's just a draw. We have the exact same 4 pawns. It would be more impressive that Levon lost this with black than it would be that Magnus won it. So Magnus thought and played the move f5. And again, visually, this position looks very, very nice. It looks like a very comfortable position. It looks like Magnus is going to go knight d4, knight e6. It looks like he can play queen e7. I just said this queen trade could potentially have a devastating effect on the black position because it allows the rook in. And then this, and then this, and then all the pieces are getting in. Very, very uncomfortable. So, f5. Levon fights back against the pawn on g4, but he is weakening some of these squares over here, right? Now, in this position, Magnus should play the very natural knight e5. It defends the pawn here. It doesn't do a whole lot. Black will probably try to play for d4 and knight d5, but white can even sack the knight. And if you do this, I have queen e6, and then I have queen c6. If knight d7, I have queen c6. If rook d7, I have bishop c6. And this is still very nice for white. The attack continues for white for sure. But Magnus thinks for a little and plays bishop h3. He loses a touch of his advantage, but it's very clear what he wants. He wants to go here. He wants this defended. He wants to open up this. And now comes the moment you've all been waiting for, which is Magnus defeating himself in a game of chess. What does that even mean, right? Like, how do you defeat yourself? You lose a game by completely of your own doing, not even a mistake, not like a blunder, not anything of that nature. You do something that it was completely unnecessary, that was essentially a help defense. I've used those words and I called it a health offense. You lost the game almost on purpose. Like, in this position, again, knight e5 was the best move. Maybe he had some knight d4, plays bishop h3, completely fine. And Levon plays d4. We've discussed this already. His idea was knight d5 and knight c3. This has always been his idea. This has been his idea since here. I showed you, like, you have to find a way to get the knight. So he does. He played f5. He then proceeded to play knight to f6. And now he played d4, facilitating this journey. Now Magnus can still, in this position, play queen e5, can play queen d2, can play queen e6 check. And the point is that even if he plays something very passive like this is capturable. And if this, c3. And everything is defended, and queen b2 is coming, and knight e6 is coming. So everything is still okay, but Magnus goes g5, which was his idea. But now Levon can put the knight on d5, but he takes first. He didn't have to take first, but he takes first. And now before he plays the move knight d5, because if he plays this now, it looks really nice, but this is very scary. And then this is very scary, and by the time the king runs away, no more knight c3, queen b2, game over. So bishop goes to g8. Another piece has entered the battle, knight d5, knight c3. And here, with both players having 2.5 minutes on their clock, Magnus played bishop to g2. And the idea of bishop to g2 was to do something very, very simple. It was to meet knight d5 with a capture. That's it. The idea was to play knight d5, bishop takes d5, and it doesn't matter. If rook takes d5 to try to checkmate, knight e6. If you take, I get in. If you play rook a5 trying to mate me, I just play c4. You can en passant me, but then I take a rook. You can do this, but then I play queen e8, and actually it's me who's winning because I force a queen trade. So bishop g2, knight d5, bishop d5. Levon, in this position, played a very nice move, rook d5. And the idea is very, very simple. The idea is, if you play bishop d5, and I play knight d5, I win. That's the idea. You can't take on d5. Because if you do, I play knight c3. I get there. So what you have to do here is you have to play again this queen move, because it guarantees a queen trade. Magnus saw this move, and f5 is not hanging, not because I'm going to go here, but because I will win your rook, which is a significantly bigger problem. Magnus certainly saw the move queen e7. He didn't miss queen e7. He has to trade the queens because it stops the attack. His plan with bishop g2 was to play knight d5, bishop d5. Levon played here. Magnus took. And then he resigned. What? But he had like 100 seconds, and the idea has been clear the entire game. I mean, From the moment the queen arrived on the a3 square, we have talked about getting the queen some help, like Damian Lillard in Portland. I don't know about that Jeremy Grant contract, but hopefully it works out. The queen on a3 just needed assistance to get to the dark squares. Levon's entire game plan revolved around getting the knight to the d5 square. What happened? This is what happened. Magnus had calculated that in this position, he could play knight e4. And that stops knight c3. The knight can't go there because it will get taken. So he thought Levon would do this, and then he would play here, and then Levon would move his king and run his king out, and knight c3 would be a thing. And after c4, here, 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 Magnus evaluated that he had better chances in the endgame. Was he right? Yes. Plus 0.12. He was right. If this sequence of moves had occurred, his evaluation was correct. But with limited time on the clock, he had a moment of chess blindness. After bishop takes d5, knight takes d5, knight e4, black has absolutely zero obligation to pin the knight to the queen. The move knight e4 in no way, shape, or form stops knight c3. Because even if you take, you lose. That's it. Queen e6, I take. Queen e8, I take. I move my king, and it's game over. Magnus Carlsen, from a completely even position, in fact, one that was a touch better for him, calculates, miscalculates, and literally captures into checkmate and resigns. It's news when Magnus loses, certainly, because of how great he is. But it's just fascinating that even the best players in the world literally blunder checkmate, which is exactly what he did, because he thought knight e4, rook e8, all of this. He just forgot. It's mate. You lose. So don't feel bad after watching this video when you boot up a chess.com game and you blunder checkmate, or a queen, or a rook, or a bishop, or all of those in the same game. Because even the best player in the world is more than capable of doing that. It happens. He went on a calculation. None of it had to happen because black played knight c3, and none of this had to happen either. He just took the rook. And this is how Magnus defeated Magnus. I hope you enjoyed. I haven't showered yet, so I'm going to go do that. And I'm going to go walk around a little bit. Can't tell you where I am. Maybe you can figure out from the stones behind me. But we continue this hostage situation. Our captors have allowed us to change to a kitchen setup. And probably this will change in a few days, but for now, at least we can make some food for ourselves. Get out of here.